Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Basics of Monitoring Your VMware Cloud at MacStadium with LogicMonitor. I'm here with Sean Corcoran, Director of Customer Success, and Corey Layton, Principal Architect here at MacStadium, who will be leading this webinar with Jake Cohen, Senior Sales Engineer at LogicMonitor. Just as a reminder, you will be muted for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions for Sean, Corey, or Jake, please put them in the chat or questions pane, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. We will do our best to answer all questions, but if we run out of time, we will get back to you after the webinar. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Sean.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for this great webinar we have planned for you on the basics of monitoring your VMware infrastructure here at MacStadium. Joined by a couple of colleagues, Jake and Corey, welcome as well. Let's start by doing a quick round of intros just so everybody has some context for who you'll be speaking with today. Corey, why don't you lead us off?
Sure. My name's Corey Layton. I'm the principal architect here at MacStadium. I've been with the company since the beginning and look forward to being able to help you guys see a little bit more about LogicMonitor today.
Jake, why don't you go next and give us a little bit of background on LogicMonitor as well?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Cohen. I'm a senior sales engineer with LogicMonitor. Been with LogicMonitor for almost 5 years, and I've been working with MacStadium for almost 4 years. In brief, LogicMonitor is a SaaS-based performance monitoring platform for everything in the infrastructure, everything from hardware and network through to applications and containers. And we've been used across MacStadium for a while, and thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely, thanks for joining us, Jake. And I can attest to the power of LogicMonitor. In my 4 years here at MacStadium, it's been an instrumental tool in helping us proactively monitor, alert, and provide better service and support to our customers. A lot of the meat of what we'll cover today are questions that we've received over the years from customers as it relates to monitoring VMware infrastructure here at MacStadium. So I'd like to actually start diving into some of those questions. So we get questions from large and small, basic to advanced. The most important question you want your monitoring to be able to answer is my environment healthy? And sometimes this question is a little bit more complicated to answer, but in the most simplistic terms, you want to know if it's green or red. Some more advanced questions have popped up over time as well, and we'll speak to those and cover those throughout this webinar. We'll start, just so everybody knows, by going through some static dashboards that we've put together. It's really the best of breed of all of the things that we've discovered about infrastructure and Mac infrastructure specifically here at MacStadium. And we'll give customers a leg up when they open their LogicMonitor environment for the first time. We're going to focus on some basics of the infrastructure, including compute, networking, storage, as well as VMware vCenter monitoring as well. The frame that we should really think about for this discussion, and I think that most of our customers understand this or know this, but the biggest use case here at MacStadium that we see is iOS continuous integration and Mac continuous integration. So anybody that's developing products for the Apple App Store, that are going to land on iPhones, they go through a rigorous testing process where they're building and shipping software called continuous integration. A lot of the monitoring that we've put together is really focused on that particular use case. And by the end of this, you should be able to walk away knowing how to answer a lot of these questions by using LogicMonitor. But before we go on, I want to start with the origin story. So we have been using LogicMonitor for a little while here, and Corey, who we have the pleasure of having on the phone today, was actually the architect that pulled LogicMonitor in the early days of MacStadium. So I thought it'd be great just to kind of understand the thought process and the value that we've been able to provide to customers by using LogicMonitor.
Thank you, Sean. So LogicMonitor was one of the early products that we looked at. We were trying to evaluate a network monitoring platform. So in the early days of MacStadium, we used several different products, most of them open source, most of them built into some of the products that we were using, such as the dashboards built into our storage arrays. Some of them were products like vSphere and actually monitoring, checking on environments through vSphere itself. So in those early days, we were looking for something that could step between the barriers in the stack and look at things from a holistic perspective. So we evaluated several different products, many of which had different caveats, different requirements, and we settled on LogicMonitor. It offered the best combination of a agentless experience with the ability to step through the entire protocol stack, or the entire software stack. So we were able to look at both the network layer, the storage layer, as well as the virtualization layer, all within the same product and all within the same pane of glass, reducing that swivel chair effect. So it really allowed for us to get a holistic picture of both our own infrastructure as well as the infrastructure we were selling to customers.
Fantastic. Thanks, Corey, for walking us through the foundations of how LogicMonitor came to be at MacStadium. I, for one, can say that it's been a super helpful tool just to help customers understand their usage. The health and performance of their infrastructure is key, especially if customers are running an external build as a service platform where they are measured in uptime by their end users, or if they're running like Capital One, for example, an internal build as a service platform that supports all of their iOS development and continuous integration. Being able to monitor the health and performance of the environment is critical. So the first deck I want to show you here, or dashboard I want to show you here, is what you'll see when you first log into your LogicMonitor portal as a customer. It's the cloud overview, and the whole point of this dashboard is to really help you understand from the moment you log in if your systems are green or red, healthy or not, right? Corey, anything in particular that you like to point out to customers as it relates to this this dashboard? I know you have a long storied history in ops and trying to maintain uptime for MacStadium as a service, but also companies before that. Anything that you would shed light on this particular dashboard?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what any good NMS or monitoring system provides you, which is what's healthy, what's not, and then drilling down into the specific alert. So there's two widgets in particular in this page that help with that, and that's the cloud status overview, with it changing colors based on the different category of what could be having issues within your environment, as well as the alerts panel, which gives you the specific alert in question. And one good thing about understanding that alerts panel is it's specific to your environment, and any alert that you see in it that is critical is an alert that MacStadium's aware of and is actioning proactively. So that gives you a real good idea of how MacStadium views your environment and what we may be actioning on your behalf to ensure uptime and availability of your environment. So I think those two together, while very basic, are the ones that speak the most about the current state of your environment.
And I, for one, love logging into a customer's cloud overview page to see that they have 100% uptime for the past 30 days. That's a real testament to the global operations team and engineering team's efforts in maintaining these environments. Some basic questions that customers often ask is how many hosts are in my environment, and this is a simple purview into answering that question as well. So next up, a big part of the continuous integration process, since we're going to focus a little bit on that today, deals with the performance of your compute. So we put together a page that really focuses on understanding how your compute, measured in CPU, is performing and how healthy that infrastructure is. On the top left, you can see that, in this particular environment, we're using roughly 21% of the CPU today out of the cluster that's available. But at peak, we actually use 45%. And we like to see that number below 80%. Anywhere above that, we start to have conversations with customers, and they tell us that, things are running a little bit hot, and there are various ways that we can solve that problem for them. Corey, what else do you see on here that might be interesting for customers to walk away with today? I mean, I, for one, didn't know what CPU ready time was until you kind of broke it down for me recently.
Sure. So like any good dashboard, it needs to tell a story and it needs to have a theme. So as you pointed out with this theme, it's about compute. And the CPU ready time is something that's specific to virtualization environments and something that VMware talks about. And essentially it's the amount of time that a VM has to wait to be allocated its allotment of vCPUs for any CPU operation. So you can think of it in a way like latency. So if you've got a VM that requires 4 vCPUs, because that's what it's spec'd for, then 4 vCPUs have to be available at that given instance. And that's how, and this measurement is how long it takes for that to happen. So seeing a high ready time could indicate that you've got issues where you've got congestion on the availability of CPU slots for the size of the VMs that you've spec'd. So if I were to see a really high number here, something in the 9-10 millisecond range that's consistent, then I would want to start looking at the CPU host utilization to get an idea of how congested the hosts are overall with CPU gigahertz consumption. Then I may also want to look at if there's a particular host that is really high versus the others, I may want to drill into that host's individual VMs. Or I may want to look at the VM top 10 CPU utilization and see if I've got a particular VM that's either running errant and consuming, tying up a lot of resources for a period of time. Or I may need to look at these VMs and understand maybe there's 1 or 2 of them that have too many vCPUs allocated and thus consuming the amount of slots that are available for other VMs to consume. So you can use multiple panels within this same, or multiple widgets within this same dashboard to actually understand that scenario or that story and be able to actually actively troubleshoot an issue within your environment utilizing these widgets.
Excellent. And another one I'll point out here, just because it's a one I've seen a lot of customers hit their head on, is the VCSA CPU utilization widget down here. A lot of customers use MacStadium and use the VMware environment at MacStadium specifically for the API capabilities that it offers. You can spin up down VMs on demand. You can create clones based off of other templates that you've created, and a lot of that performance and reliability depends on the VCSA or the vCenter server appliance. So here we're actually able to display how much CPU that VCSA is using. 10% is fine, but anything greater than 80%, we would start to get a little bit concerned and have a conversation with the customer. Before I move on, actually, I just wanted to give a chance for Jake to kind of comment. I think it's pretty cool how LogicMonitor aggregates all of this data from several different parts of the infrastructure, CPU, storage, VM data. Jake, how does LogicMonitor do all that?
Yeah, so LogicMonitor follows a collector-based architecture, and what that means is that Corey's team has deployed a LogicMonitor collectors in the infrastructure actually outside of the customer's firewalls, and that collector then queries the vSphere API. And this is great in that it gives the customers a truly vanilla VM experience, so they don't need to install agents to have this level of visibility. And from a security perspective, having that polling mechanism outside of the customer's firewall is great from end user security conscious perspective. And that collector then sends its data, the collected data, out to the LogicMonitor SaaS platform, so that all of this data isn't hosted by MacStadium, and so Corey and his team can focus on the core business functions and applications. Happy to dig in more into how we collect this data, but that's the general overview.
Yeah, no, thank you for that overview. Super helpful. I don't want to delay another important dashboard that we put together here for, again, the frame of continuous integration is focused on memory and how that is performing as a function inside the environment. I mentioned that a lot of customers are obviously using MacStadium as continuous integration infrastructure. Some jobs are accelerated by availability of a higher CPU with higher core count, higher thread count. However, some build jobs are memory bound, and so the more memory you give the job or the VM, the faster that the job goes. It really depends on customer by customer, case by case. But for those customers with a memory bound build job, they obviously want to keep an eye on how memory is performing and how healthy it is. Corey, what is one of the widgets on here that stands out to you that you like to point out to customers?
Sure. So one of the widgets that I think becomes pretty important to understand your environment and understand where you're at, especially from a capacity planning perspective, is the average ballooned VM memory. So this is a really handy widget, and in some cases you may want to swap this out for the swap widget in its place, but either of these can serve the same purpose. Ballooned VM memory is when you look at VMware's approach to handling memory contention, ballooning is the first thing that happens if you have VMware tools installed. Highly recommend that you have VMware tools installed. And it allows the balloon driver to inflate and consume up memory that has been marked ready for being free, or defragment memory to allow it to be then deflated and return that memory back to the host via host memory pool. So it can basically take a VM that maybe consumed a lot of memory at one point in time with various different applications running, free that memory up, and then return it to the underlying hypervisor so it can be allocated to other VMs as needed. This acts as a great canary in the coal mine kind of experience where you understand that you've got some moments of contention and that you might need to look at addressing your available memory, either through adding additional memory modules or adding additional hosts. And you can use this information to also kind of zero in, say if the memory, top 10 VMs, memory utilization, if you've got one particular VM that is using a lot more than another one, you can judge from there. You can also judge from looking at your hosts and seeing the amount of memory that they're consuming. But overall, this kind of tells that story about what's your overall cluster's memory availability and how close you are to contention.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen customers or heard from customers who have had a runaway build job experience where one of their VMs decided to consume a lot more of the resources of the underlying infrastructure for some reason that was unknown or unforeseen at the time. So being able to keep on resource consumption like memory from this dashboard or from this single pane of glass is super helpful for customers. Another question that gets asked a lot, especially in enterprise environments, is the network healthy? That's one of the first places that people tend to point their fingers, unfortunately, for our network engineering friends. And this dashboard is, in essence, a way to understand the health of your network as it relates to the MacStadium environment. All of our customers have dedicated firewalls that they usually set up VPN tunnels to connect to all of the the Mac VMs and Mac hosts that are behind the firewall here. So this dashboard allows them to understand their throughput, if they're seeing errors in the form of interface discards, in general how much throughput they're pushing over a certain period of time, and if there are any VMs that are consuming more than their fair share of memory. Corey, I think you mentioned the firewall global internet connectivity is kind of an interesting one for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that widget works?
Sure. So while it looks like it's just a normal uptime widget, which it is, It's interesting the data that actually backs that widget. So that widget's actually backed by multiple monitoring polling stations throughout the world. So LogicMonitor has 5 different data centers. Well, they're actively pinging that particular firewall and ensuring that it's currently up. So we're able to aggregate that data from those 5 locations to actually see the health of that device being available from a global perspective. So it's not just a single ping operation from a single collector. It's actually being monitored from a geodiverse set of 5 different collectors throughout the world. So I think that gives a lot of visibility to the customer on their reachability and what that looks like for their environment.
Excellent. Last but not least, before we get into the interactive portion of this webinar, is the storage overview. A big part of reliability and scalable environments here at MacStadium is the ability for us to deploy clouds using VMware that are attached to SAN storage that you can present to multiple hosts, multiple VMs. So it's important to understand the health of that storage infrastructure and also how well it's performing over time. As you can see, we've got a widget on here that looks at consumption by VM in the form of disk IOPS. You can see the classic view of capacity. In this case, we're using 86% of the capacity that's presented to our environment. Corey, what's one of the things that you think is important for customers to note about their storage consumption?
Sure. So, one of the common themes that we've talked about today has been CI and CI as a service and CI/CD. So, a big thing that drives CI is your disk workload. So, being able to have a very low latency, high bandwidth workload experience is really important and can really contribute to build times. So, looking at a dashboard like this, you can use the combination of your IOPS throughput and latency to get an idea of how your storage is performing. On average, all tier 1 storage provided by MacStadium is 2 milliseconds average or better. So we try to provide a very high performant, high workload capable storage that allows customers to have the top, in class CI experience, and hopefully this is able to, you're able to reflect that in these 3 graphs, and you're able to see where your, what your workload's looking like. Additionally, you can also look for any kind of unusual situations in your workload. I think a great one is if you look at the top 10 VMs by disk IO, you see that unusual spike there that's kind of off by itself. That may be something you may want to look into. But this overall screen gives you a real good picture of what your workload's looking like and how much workload that you're trying to push through the system, and gives you an idea of where you may be scaling to in the future.
Speaking of looking into it further, I think it's a great segue to the live portion of this demonstration. Hopefully everybody can see the actual LogicMonitor interface pulled up on my screen here. So there are a couple of, I think, unique and interesting tools that are packaged inside of your LogicMonitor environment that all customers should know about. I mentioned that we have the cloud overview page, and that's where most customers will find a lot of value. One really cool tool that I like to be able to show customers and that I think resonates with them is the ability to just share this dashboard out to anybody on the team, whether it's a coworker or a manager who's curious about how the infrastructure is performing. This is a great feature to be able to demonstrate that with. You can pre-select it for the set time range based on the default, or if you want to look at the last 30 days, for example, you could do that. Hit share, and here's the exact link that a customer or whoever you're sharing this dashboard would get. And as you can see, it's all the same information that is displayed in our view of the dashboard as well. I think one common question that I get from customers relates to how much CPU they're consuming over a given period of time, and if there's a way to kind of forecast how much CPU they'll need in the future. It's a great question. It comes up a lot. LogicMonitor makes this process a little bit easier by giving us the ability to forecast and also look at anomaly detection. So I'm going to start with anomaly detection because I think that's an interesting place for us as it relates to CPU, which is generally a little bit more cyclical in how it gets consumed. But if we look at the anomaly detection here, LogicMonitor basically shows us that for the given time range, which is the last 24 hours in this case, we're seeing spikes around 200 gigahertz of CPU utilization. The expected range is actually this blue area here. So this red lines are actually outside of the norm. So anomaly detection, something that is, obviously happening that is not normal. The other interesting thing that you can do with this information is compare it to a 24-hour offset. So yesterday, what was I doing at the same time that I'm doing today? We've used this a number of times to help customers understand their consumption and also to try and predict, what they'll need in the future going forward. So if it's not clear, the orange bar represents, the CPU consumption that occurred in the last 24 hours. This orange spike here is around 114 gigahertz. Today it's up at almost 200 gigahertz. So there's some kind of change that happened there. Maybe there are just more build jobs that were exposed to the environment and run by developers because we're close to release time. Who knows? But this gives you a way to really monitor consumption and predict it going forward. Last thing I want to kind of show our audience today is the consumption of storage. We talked a little bit about that here today, and there's a forecasting tool built into LogicMonitor that actually allows us to go back and look at some training window, whether it's the last 3 months, and then look at how that training window will shape into the future. So in this case, this particular data store is consuming around 70% utilization. Not really seeing any pops in usage here. So the line of best fit is relatively flat, but that's great. We like flat. It's predictable, right? You can go to your finance team and say, I'm not going to need any more storage for the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be. And finance teams like that. I think that probably does it for the live demonstration. And I want to give us some time for questions because I think I see a few coming in here. So let me flip back over to the PowerPoint and we can wrap here with some questions. Stephanie, is there any questions that have been submitted by our audience that we should focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question is, can I receive alerts from MacStadium's LogicMonitor portal about the health of my cloud environment?
Absolutely. So today, critical alerts are immediately flagged under your account in your MacStadium portal. So the way that the environment is currently set up, if there is there's a threshold set in LogicMonitor, and there are, if a threshold gets exceeded, it will trigger a critical alert in LogicMonitor, which translates into a ticket for our team to look at underneath your account. There's probably more to it, and I'll actually give Corey the floor if he would so care to shed some more light on how that process works.
Sure. So as it is today, just like Sean alluded to, when a situation happens and it causes an issue that triggers a critical alert, we open a ticket. That ticket then gets notified to you in regards to that critical alert. Other levels of alerts we can definitely alert on. LogicMonitor is from a best practice perspective, has a warning level alert that is considered to be an alert that you generally just want to audit periodically because it doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. The error level alert is one that you may want to action on. So that's a level of alert that is available. But we do have mechanisms for fine tuning and providing you specific alerts that may even be outside of criticals if necessary. So that is an option that is available to us and that we can work with you and leverage if necessary.
And that's a great point to make. Some customers have more customized needs. They want to be able to tune and tweak some of the settings that are in here, and we are very open for understanding any unique needs that may exist outside of what we've really defined for LogicMonitor as it stands today. So we'd love to hear from the audience. There's a couple ways to get in touch as well. But Stephanie, what other questions are on the board there?
So how many users can have access to this portal?
I don't think there's a limit. Good news. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we have accounts at MacStadium who have a lot of users underneath the account who all want access to LogicMonitor, and it's not a problem.
Great. Okay, so the next question is, can I customize these dashboards?
Corey, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, the dashboards are fully customizable. The original intent for some of these dashboards was to allow you to have a conversation with your success team so that we're all looking at the same thing. But you also have the capability of creating your own dashboards from scratch and being able to tell your own monitoring story through those dashboards. So that's also available to you, and you can create those both as public dashboards that are available to be visible throughout for your whole team, or you can create private dashboards which are only visible by you. So if you've got like a specific issue or a specific thing that's meaningful for you that doesn't necessarily need to be shared amongst the whole team, you can even just create a dashboard that's private to your login.
Great. So the next question I have is, does MacStadium have or will they release dashboards like these for Orca?
So we've already been in the works for that. Orca dashboards are definitely something that is coming for most customers that are logging into LogicMonitor today. So I would say stay tuned, but we have some early versions of that in the works already.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, if you're an Orca customer at the moment and you are interested in getting access to dashboards for your environment, please reach out to success at MacStadium. We'd be more than happy to coordinate a monitoring onboarding for your Orca environment.
I have one more question, or I have two more questions actually. How can I get access to LogicMonitor for my account?
Good question. Actually, you can email support at MacStadium with names and emails that you would like to have added for your account in particular. So it's a pretty simple ask and easy process for us to add you to your dashboard.
Great, and I think that this is our last question. If you guys have any more questions, just feel free to put it in the questions pane and we'll try to get to it. I have some more advanced questions about MacStadium / my MacStadium / LogicMonitor account. Who should I reach out to?
Yeah, I'll take that one. If you have any kind of more advanced questions about monitoring in general, we have a customer success team here at MacStadium whose sole job it is to talk to our existing customer base, make sure they're happy, make sure we're doing everything in our power to really help them understand their environments, and monitoring is one of the ways that we do that. So please reach out to success at MacStadium, and we can certainly help.
Great, so that's all the questions I have. So thank you guys for joining us today. If you would like to watch the webinar, we will be uploading this webinar to our YouTube page, so be sure to subscribe to keep up to date.